the early 1960s in Jackson, Mississippi, Dr. Everett Park of the United Church of Christ conducted an undercover investigation of local television stations in collaboration with civil rights leaders. The NAACP had already filed 2 complaints that stations were blacking out coverage addressing racial integration. Both were rejected by the FCC. In 1964, the church used information from that investigation to petition the FCC to deny the license to one of those stations, WLBT. The FCC refused, so the church went to court. And in 1969, the U.S. Court of Appeals reversed the FCC, marking the first time courts had denied a station's license based on racial discrimination. For the United Church of Christ, which describes itself as a church of firsts, it was one victory in a long history of faith-based action oriented towards justice. In 1972, the church ordained Reverend William R. Johnson, the first openly gay minister in a historic Protestant denomination. In 1987, the church's Commission for Racial Justice published the landmark environmental justice study, Toxic Waste and Race, which found that communities of color in the United States were disproportionately likely to have hazardous waste facilities sited in their neighborhoods. Those findings led the project's directors, Dr. Benjamin Chavis and Charles Lee, to coin the terms environmental racism and environmental justice, contributing to the launch of a critical field of study. Now, that's the same Dr. Benjamin Chavis of UCC, who was arrested in 1973, along with 9 other civil rights activists falsely accused of arson at a grocery store. The church raised more than $1 million to bail those activists, or as you may know them, the Wilmington 10, out of jail. In 1976, the church elected Reverend Joseph H. Evans as their new president, the first African-American leader of a racially integrated mainline church in this country. And in 2005, when up to 68% of the country still believed that marriages between same-sex couples should not be valid, the United Church of Christ General Synod passed a resolution in support of same-gender marriage equality. This week, more than 57 years after the founding of the United Church of Christ, the UCC has yet again undertaken a historic first for equality. The incredible constitutional claim the church is making to create change in the Deep South is next.
This lawsuit is about more than restrictions imposed on ministers. It is about safeguarding Americans' First Amendment rights to freedom of religion and freedom of expression from government interference.
Now, that was Reverend Jeffrey A. Black, the president and general minister of the United Church of Christ, making an argument that we normally hear used against same-sex marriage. But he and his church are suing North Carolina to overturn the state's ban on marriage for LGBT couples. It is the first of more than 60 such legal challenges across the country to make a faith-based argument. On Monday, leaders from the United Church of Christ joined with other North Carolina faith leaders and same-sex couples to file a lawsuit against the state's Attorney General Ray Cooper and other local officials. One of the targets of the lawsuit is North Carolina General Statute 51-7, which spells out marriage license requirements and effectively makes it a crime, in fact, a Class 1 misdemeanor for religious officials to conduct same-sex marriages in the state. Back with me at the table are Caton Dawson, National Republican Consultant and former chair of the South Carolina GOP, Michael Skolnick, Political Director for Russell Simmons and the Editor-in-Chief of GlobalGrind.com, and Christina Beltran, who is Associate Professor of Social and Cultural Analysis at New York University. And joining me now from Cleveland, Ohio, is Reverend Bennett Guest, a national officer of the United Church of Christ. Reverend, thanks for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Melissa. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So we in Nerdland were really enjoying reading about this strategy, in large part because, again, if we were to play that video of the head of the UCC, it certainly sounds like he's about to make an argument against marriage equality rather than saying we need our religious freedom in order to perform same-sex marriages. How did you all end up with this strategy?
Well, this lawsuit actually began in North Carolina because United Church of Christ clergy and clergy from other traditions were actually organizing marriage junkets, if you will, which they were chartering buses and taking couples that wanted to get married up to Washington, D.C., because these pastors wanted to be able to be with their parishioners when they were getting legally married. And they knew them, they loved them, and wanted to be with them. And so these parishioners and clergy began talking, saying, why is it that we, as religious people, have to leave our communities of faith behind, have to leave our families behind, have to leave our sacred spaces behind in order to go to another place to perform a religious ceremony that is perfectly permissible in the United Church of Christ? Add to that, North Carolina's Amendment 1, which was passed by voters in 2012, not only outlaws same-gender marriage, but also went further and outlawed civil unions and domestic partnerships. So in a great overreach by the North Carolina legislature, they actually made it a crime, as you said, for clergy to perform any religious ceremony, marriage ceremony, without a license. Of course, gay and lesbian people can't get a license, and therefore our clergy are being faced with criminal prosecution for blessing same-gender marriages.
Okay, that kind of overreach feels to me like precisely the kind of thing that is, in fact, just that it goes too far. In fact, when we look at sort of views on marriage in North Carolina, on marriage equality, a recent poll by Elon University in September of 2003 shows us that although support is only at just less than 43%, 42.6%, that the opposition still doesn't even reach a majority. Opposition is only at 46.5%. And if we look at it by age, it is clear that a majority of young people, 18 to 30 years old, in North Carolina absolutely support same-sex marriage. Given those realities, how optimistic are you about this case?
I'm very optimistic about this case because there's been an incredible groundswell of organizing across the state of North Carolina. The Campaign for Southern Equality is doing incredible organizing and acts of civil disobedience in North Carolina and across the South to try to tell the real personal stories behind same-gender couples. And also, we're being joined in this lawsuit, although the UCC is the lead plaintiff. We have some outstanding local clergy and same-gender couples that are plaintiffs as well, and they represent a broad coalition of Reformed Judaism, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and your own Unitarian Universalists. So we're proud of the ways in which we're telling stories which are the ways that we really make a difference in this effort.
All right, let me come out to my table a little bit. I'd love to get your responses. What do you think about this strategy, Michael?
Well, I think if you look at young people, it's interesting because 68% right in North Carolina, but across with Republican young people,
yes,
61% support gay marriage. So I think Republicans as a strategy should start thinking differently on gay marriage, or else they may be out of a job pretty soon because young folks are getting older, they're voting in big blocks, and this is sort of uncommon strategy from the faith-based community. As we just spoke about sports, Brendan Iron and Chris Cluey coming out in favor of gay marriage. These uncommon folks coming to the table on gay marriage are persuading young folks to look at this differently.
Yeah, okay, so I love that idea that there is this there's this age difference. That's part of what's going on, right, for the Republican Party. But even more than that, Kate, we were looking, and this Attorney General, the one who is actually named here, said, it's been some time ago now, but he actually said that North Carolina should change its laws to allow marriage equality, that he believes in basic fairness, but did also say that he had a responsibility, a duty as AG in North Carolina to make the arguments in court. But this certainly is not someone who's like, rah, rah, I can't wait to do this. And let me just also say, the Arkansas Attorney General, Dustin McDaniel, on Saturday, in an AP Managing Editors Convention said, I want to tell you, I do support marriage equality. I do believe Arkansans should have the right to be equal in the eyes of the law. Are y'all coming? Are you coming with us? Are the Republicans coming, Caden?
Let's unpack it a little bit. and we'll throw the African American churches in there on the pro-life issues and same-sex marriage issues, and they're going to be heard in North Carolina. They're coming and they're going to be heard, and they're going to be on the other side of this aisle, in my opinion. You're also sitting in a state that's heavily Southern Baptist. You're going to hear that coming, so it's going to be a lot more than a one-sided fight. The Attorney General Cooper, he's running for governor in 2 years. Okay, he's going to run against McCrory, who's a pretty popular governor.
And let the church say amen.
Okay, but what's going to happen here is the numbers, as good as they sound, the electoral numbers don't add up because those were ballot measures to change the Constitution, and both on the Democratic side and the Republican side, it upheld. So if you're going to go into electoral politics, that issue lost in North Carolina. Now, is the temperature changing? It is. North Carolina also put some stuff in there for civil unions. That's going to be another part of the argument.
Reverend Guest, in Cleveland, one last question. You know, we've been covering Moral Mondays here. We've been talking about the centrality of North Carolina. How much do you see this as being part of kind of a larger movement within the context of North Carolina?
Well, there's incredible organizing, of course, happening in North Carolina on many fronts. And this is one of the significant issues, and that's why there's a significant coalition behind this. I agree with you that this is about changing hearts and not minds, but this is also a constitutional argument that we have a very strong case right here. This law in North Carolina is akin to North Carolina telling pastors that they can't baptize babies until they have seen a birth certificate, or that a pastor can't bless your Harley Davidson unless you have a valid license plate. It is a very clear overreach by the state of North Carolina. It's not only absurd, it's blatantly unconstitutional.
Thank you to Reverend Ben Guest in Cleveland. Also, thank you to Caton Dawson, Michael Skolnick, and Christina Beltran. I just want to say one last, my favorite thing about marriage equality this week actually came from Dolly Parton in an interview with the Daily Mail. Her reason for supporting marriage equality: I think gay couples should be allowed to marry. They should suffer just like us heterosexuals. Ha ha ha. That cracked me up. More when we come back.